So I wanted to share something with you guys tonight. I decided to go and take a look and see if there had been any news that's happened over the last, several months or so, because I've been working and I haven't had a chance to do any research. So a piece of news came out by Hawking that where he has changed his mind on the idea and understanding of what he calls a black hole. And so if we take a look here, we can see that he says now that they're portals to another universe. Well, it takes a little bit of history, but let me describe for you what has transpired. So when I first started looking at the Orion Nebula a long time ago, I noticed that it had been in cathedrals, which I'll show you here in just a little bit. It's always placed at the high altar. Didn't know why back then, but I know now, and I can show that to you as I move on. I'm going to go through this rather quickly because I need to go to bed because I got to sleep for work tomorrow. But anyways, so I discovered that there was this vortex or black hole or whatever you want to call this thing in the center of the trapezium of the Orion Nebula. And I discovered it 1 year before NASA ever came out with anything on it. And then 1 year later, NASA came out and said, well, the trapezium stars are moving around rather quickly, so we think there might be a black hole in the center of the trapezium, which is 100 times the mass of the Sun. So they confirmed my theory that there was some kind of a vortex in the center of the Orion Nebula trapezium. I discovered this because of artwork that I was finding in the cathedrals and through symbolism that I had researched and so forth, which I will show you a little bit of here in just a second. So the theory back then was that a black hole basically contains so much gravity that everything just went into it and it sucked it all in, and that was it. But now the story's changed. The story has changed in becoming something where it is now a door to another universe, which is what I had been saying all along based on Kabbalistic research that I had done. So listen to this real quick, and it kind of sheds a little bit more light on what we're talking about.
Astronomers have long thought that star clusters form when clouds of gas and dust condense, constructing themselves from the center out. Researchers combing through data have offered a different take now. After studying two clusters, NGC 2024 at the center of the Flame Nebula and the Orion Nebula cluster with NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, and using infrared telescopes, evidence showed that the stars on the outside of the formations were actually the oldest.
So, if you heard what he says, the stars on the outside of the nebula are the oldest stars. Well, that makes a lot of sense, considering that if you take a look at the history of the Orion Nebula, you find that these stars that are in the trapezium started appearing. They weren't noticed at first. In fact, the Orion Nebula wasn't noticed by any astronomers until 1610, and except for the Mayans, of course, which they built one of their largest pyramids off of, which is El Tigre, which we'll take a look at here in just a second. So the youngest ones are the ones that are coming out of the middle of the trapezium. The oldest ones are the ones that are on the outside of that center area, which means that it suggests, especially now, considering that a black hole is a door to another universe, then it would actually satisfy the law of equilibrium by saying that if there's a black hole that sucks everything into the other universe, then there's obviously a white hole which brings things into the universe. And this is also Kabbalistic as well, and we'll take a look at that on the Tree of Life as well. So we have this manifestation coming through another universe, basically. And it comes through in this one area. This is the divine spark. So then we take a look at some of the stuff from Blavatsky's, and she mentions the pyramids. And she says the apex is lost in the clear blue sky of the land of the pharaohs and typifies the primordial point, lost in the unseen universe from whence started the first race of the spiritual prototypes of man. So the pyramid is not only something that is associated with the body, but it's also something which is associated to the cosmos and the way the cosmos is laid out. because man is like the cosmos in many senses, as above, so below. So we have this artifact here with Orion on the bottom of it, but this eye is what it's called the Eye of Kether, which Manly P. Hall mentions and everything. This is the open eye that you first see where manifestation starts pouring in from the other universe, or the Ein Sof Or, into the physical universe. So then there's this article by Harvard called Orion Nebula, Where in History Is It? And they start breaking down the mystery of the whole Orion Nebula phenomenon, because it was missed by everyone in the beginning. Nobody saw any of the nebulous matter or anything like that until one of the stars apparently lit up where they could see more of it. So Galileo totally missed all of it. In fact, there was nothing about the Orion Nebula mentioned before 1610 by any of the great astronomers that we know of. Although the Mayans, like I said, they knew about the Orion Nebula. They knew it's from their three hearthstones of creation. The fire that's in the middle is the fire in the hearth, which is the seat of creation according to the Mayans. So we have the Mayans and we have the Egyptians both agreeing on this point, this primordial point, being this part where the physical universe disappears into the unseen universe. And that's what is represented on this Kabbalistic diagram right here. So the Ein Sof Or is basically limitless light pouring in from the Ein Sof Or into the crown, which is the very first part, or the head of the system inside the physical world. So when we take a look at that, we can see that it's pouring in the head. We take a look at the tree of life here, and you place the human body on it. The head is basically these three areas up here. It represents Kether, wisdom, and Bina, which is understanding. And I don't have time to go into all that right now, but if you could just imagine that Kether is kind of like the opening, Hokmah is the force pouring through, and then Bina would be the area that the force kind of settles in. So you can imagine something pouring in through the outside in this jet, basically, which would represent Hokmah, this force coming through, and then Bina represents the sea of space, Kabbalistically, which represents that container area where all of the force that pours through settles. So it's almost like a Celtic knot, which is what we have right here. So we have this little door in the sky above Kether, and this is a door that goes into the other universe of the Ein Sof Or. Now, I'm not the only one that's mentioned this, but other people have as well in the past, but no one's put this stuff together. So we take a look at the table of manifestations here. If you go across religions, you will see that there are these things get manifested. In other words, it's like a tree that grows and it has limbs. So the very trunk of the tree is where everything starts, and it begins to branch out. And this 0, 00, and 000 represent the unseen part of the universe. And then finally 1 represents the physical part of the universe. If we go down to Hermetic philosophy here, or actually Jewish Kabbalah, which is a good one. So the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof Or. The Ein Sof Or, which is what I was showing you right here, is pouring into the Kether, or the crown, which is number 1. So if we go back over here and we take a look at this diagram, so this is the Ein Sof Or pouring into Kether, and this represents the first mobile. It represents the nebula. Okay, it's the nebula, then the zodiac, and then the planets, because the nebula is what creates the stars and all the planets and so forth. This is the reason why we see all of this stuff inside the Orion Nebula. It is the beginning point, but it also represents the head of the system. So if we come back over here, so in Manly Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages, he says Kether is the crown of the prototypic head and perhaps refers to the pineal gland. The Hokmah and Binah are the right and left hemispheres, respectively, of the great brain. So these areas, these top three areas, these represent the head and the brain area. Okay? This is the pineal gland, and this is the left and right hemispheres of the brain. If we take a look at what that represents cosmically, we can see that Kether, the crown, prima mobile, represents the fiery heavens. Then we have the first motion, we have the zodiac, Saturn, and if you take a look at any Kabbalistic diagram, that is what you're looking at, because the Kabbalistic diagram follows also the planets as well. So we have the nebula, which is 1, 2, and 3, consisting of the opening, the force pouring through, and the place it settles in. So the top three is kind of representative of the nebula. After that, then you have Saturn, because this kind of, the Trinity moves down to Saturn, and then you have all the planets, Jupiter, and then you have Mars, and you have the Sun. So this is all the planets it represents right here. And that's why you're seeing the same thing over here. Okay? So Timothy Hogan, which is the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, he's made a couple of videos on this, and I've shown you how the human body was put into these cathedrals. And if you take a look at the layout, you'll notice that these cathedrals, the high altar is right here, where the brain is. And then you have the choir, which is right where the mouth is, and you can see how it's laid out. The pelvic bone rests right at the opening, or the doors, and if you notice the doors to a church, they look a lot like, a woman's private parts, basically, because that is the birthing canal area, which represents the doors down here that go into the cathedral. This is the great choir, and this is the brain. So the high altar is always the brain, and it also represents Kether, and it also represents the fiery nebula. Okay, and this is the reason why we see the nebula in all of these cathedrals. So here's an example of one of the first things I found with the Orion Nebula. This was done in 1730, and you can see that they have placed these cloud formations on here with the same bow that you see right here, the bow shock on both of them, and this brightest part in the middle. You can see how I've done comparisons to the different places in the cloud, and this is found in multiple cathedrals across Europe. This is Amiens Cathedral, which is also another representation of the human body, and as you can see, the high altar area is represented as a nebula. So when we take a look at Osiris, his symbol is an eye on a throne. And if we take a look at what Wallace Budge said, he says that basically his symbol is an eye on a throne. And if we take a look at this eye from various symbolism, we'll see that it's actually a vortex, which is right in the center. So basically, what I'm getting at here is that the stars in the very center of the trapezium are the youngest. And I believe, it's my opinion, Kabbalistically, it tells the same story. And what we see in all the symbolism from ancient Egypt, and all of the Christian cathedrals, everything. It's telling us this area that between these trapezium stars, which is where this white hole or portal to another universe is, which is also described by Ellen White. This is spitting out stars from the Ein Sof R into the physical universe. Here's a picture of El Tigre complex showing the three hearthstones of creation, and this red area that you see right here represents the Orion Nebula. This area right here, and it represents the seat of creation to the Mayans. Then we have Ellen White and her Orion Stargate, where she described going through a series of planets in her vision, and then came to a gap in the sky, and then to the opening heavens, which was described as the Orion Nebula. And then back then, we didn't know about black holes, but there was mentioned a gate going from here to another part of the universe through Orion Nebula. When they said through Orion Nebula, they're saying through that portal, which was described as a gate a long time ago, through that gate, which we've now confirmed actually exists. This is the hieroglyph for Orion, and these are actually the 3 belt stars. And then you have this large star right here. Well, the Orion Nebula has often been referred to as a fuzzy star. The reason it's so much larger is because the Orion Nebula, if you could actually see it in the sky, is a lot larger than those 3 stars that you see above it. It's just that you can't see it, and light pollution and stuff like that. Right here is a picture from NASA showing the Orion Nebula, and I believe this is infrared or some form of infrared. But you can see right where the trapezium stars are, you can see that there is a very bright area. Some people think that's just the trapezium stars, but I don't think so, because if we take a look, we can see that these look like jets coming out of this thing. And also we have the image of an eye right here as well, but I believe that this is the white hole where everything is pouring out. What you see up here is stars forming. So anyways, what I just wanted to show you guys is where all this research is going. It all confirms itself when you take a look around, and thanks to Hawking, another one of my guesses was confirmed, and that is that this is just it's a portal to the other universe, and it makes total sense because a black hole takes the stuff from here and to the other universe, and a white hole spits it back into the universe again. So when I envisioned it one day when I was thinking about it, I thought of two universes breathing against each other, where some parts are opened only to us, so we get stuff in, and the other parts, the other universe gets back in again. So anyways, I hope you thought this was interesting, and it just confirms a lot of stuff that I've been saying. So I'll be looking for news to confirm that they're actually saying that stars are coming from an area that they can't see from this portal, much like they're calling a black hole now, just the reverse of that. So you guys take care. I'll talk to you soon.